Before we get into this episode, I want to thank our Council of Elders. These are our top tier Patreon supporters at the top of the episode so that we can get a totally uninterrupted interview with Bert, the singer of Chunk No Captain Chunk. Our emo elders are Andre Prevost, Johnny Leftwich, Jason Carey, Anonymous, Chris Lukey, Nathan Eshelman, and Drew Edwards. Thank you all so much for supporting the show. You can check out the Patreon at patreon.com/reminiscent. But the reason that you are all here, the making of Gone Are the Good Days by Chunk No Captain Chunk. I wanted to kind of let you know how I came across this song and the production and what made me want to reach out to you specifically. I really have to admit at the top, and I apologize, I'm not like a super long-term Chunk No Captain Chunk fan. Like I knew In Friends We Trust, obviously everyone did, when that song came out, but I don't know what was going on. I was a mess in 2011, 2012, and I just didn't keep up with it. But I was doing some like admin work for my company and just kind of letting the YouTube algorithm do its thing. And it was the day that Bitter released. And the opening riff just kind of like stopped me in my tracks. I was like, ooh, what's this? Took a little break from the work. And as soon as the full band came in, I was just like floored by the production. And the rest of my day was just gone. I watched that music video probably 30 times in a row. And I just like needed to know more about the production. I Googled who did it. I ended up emailing you, not knowing that the producer was also the singer of the band. And I think that just opens up a whole other realm of possibilities of questions to ask, because that's such a unique situation to be in, to be writing and recording and mixing and all that stuff. So I'm really excited to dig into the songwriting and the production and the mixing aspect of this album that drops at the time of release of this episode. The album is out right now. I'd encourage you to pick it all up. But I have with me Bert, the singer of Chunk No Captain Chunk and the producer, recording engineer, mix engineer of this album. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you for having me. And this is this is great. This is like promo days at the moment. Like it's cool to be able to just talk about the album, but like I'm honestly, it's always the same kind of question over and over for like most of the medias. But I have to say I'm very glad to be able to talk in like, and I don't want to go too technical, obviously, but just to be able to talk about the production specifically is actually very, very cool for me, because this is something I take very seriously. And this is just, great to talk about your own stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always found that producers are very excited to talk because no one ever really wants to talk to them. They want to talk to the artist, but I've done audio engineering. Right now I'm doing podcast production, but when I started in audio engineering, are you familiar with Taylor Larson?
Yeah, sure.
He did like Periphery, Darkest Hour. So I interned at his studio for like 5 or 6 months. And this was after a 4-year degree in audio production. I went and saw how a record is actually made, and it blew my mind, dude. Like, I think there's so much that people would never. So, for example, when I listen to Bitter, and I really want to get into the specifics, I checked my iTunes library. The count is at 104 listens, and I've probably watched the music video an equal amount of times. Every time I listen, I hear a different layer that I didn't hear before.
Just for Bitter?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Just for Bitter. Yo, it's legitimately All the Small Things by Blink-182 will always be my favorite song of all time. That is the song that made me realize music is what my life is going to be for the rest of my life. Bitter is my second favorite song ever written. It is like, it's just the perfect track. And again, we'll get into specifics, but again, I don't really know a ton about you personally. I would love to hear a bit about how you got into music, how you became a musician, and how that's kind of slid into music production.
All right. So I started music like a long time ago. I was like 11, maybe 12, but I started with the piano. I learned music on piano. So I never, I don't even play guitar or anything. But the cool thing about learning music through piano is you get like a kind of like a global approach of music and music theory. So obviously I started with like, my parents wanted me to do like something very standard. So they took me to what we call in France, the conservatoire, which is like the music school, but like it's very based on, classical stuff. But it's a cool way to actually learn, not music theory, but to learn first, how to read music. Also, you will get, when you're like, especially learning through like on a keyboard, on a piano, like you will practice also how to get familiar with your instrument because it's very technical and all of that. So it's cool. However, classical music is not like the best way to actually, first enjoy what you're playing because, I don't know. It's weird. There's like some piece that I really enjoy playing, but it's not stuff that I will enjoy listening. It's weird. So after like 1 year 2 years, of doing this, I went to a different school. It's more like an alternative sort of piano school, which actually allowed me to learn music theory. So that's where I started to actually play a little bit of jazz, but also with music theory, I started to understand how music works, how, what makes sense, like what kind of like combination of notes you want to get that specific mood. For example, you're going to play that one chord with 3 notes, but if you add that 4th one specifically with that right interval, you will get a specific vibe. And if you add like a 5th one, you'll get a richer tones, and because a lot of the jazz music is actually based on chords. And to me, just playing with chords, it sounded more interesting to me. And that's also where you can actually do a little bit of improv. And yeah, that's where, I started to really enjoy music, not keyboard or piano or whatever, music in general, because I very quickly, I was like 14, I could play just by ear my favorite songs, and that allowed me to, that opened like an entire world kind of like opened to me, just like this. And the thing is, when I was 14, 15, like, I was listening to like punk rock bands, like Blink-182 also is like my all-time favorite, of course. Oh, and I have a funny story, but I have a funny story after that, but I will focus on your question first. So punk rock was kind of like the music I was enjoying the most. The thing is, like, for some reason, like guitar has never been like appealing to me. Like it's never been an instrument that I wanted to play, even though like I really enjoy the sound of it. But it's never been an instrument that kind of I wanted to learn. But the thing is, like, when you listen to punk rock, like, obviously you can, there's like few rock bands. There's a lot of rock bands with piano in it, but that was not the kind of bands that I wanted to be in. So my thing, even on like my very first bands, I always played with like punk rock bands, metal bands, but without even like playing piano in it. So I was always kind of like the designated singer vocalist, but I was actually taking part more on the songwriting process, because since I had those like fundamentals and like those knowledge and skills on the music theory and how to write songs in general, I had always something to bring on the table, for those bands. And then I entered we started Chunk in 2008, and in the first songs of Chunk, there was a little bit of keyboard. But it was more like Nintendo lead synth sort of lines, It was not very interesting parts. But what's funny with Chunk, though, and I'm going a little bit further with your question, though, with this one, but like the other guys don't really write riffs. I am the one who's writing guitar riffs on a keyboard. And that's actually what makes the sound of Chunk, is because like the riffs are not so intuitive for a guitar player in a way. I don't know. But that's where, we sounded kind of like different since the first day we started the band, because like the riffs are not written by guitar players.
That's super interesting, man. I feel like a lot of pop punk gets a lot of flack for like, you know, 3 chords, power chords, and I think a lot of the music that we're all inspired by is derived certainly from, you know, 94's Dookie by Green Day and Enema of the State, even back to Buddha and stuff. But it definitely sounds like, you know, you guys and many others are at the risk of sounding like a douchey like food show. It's like really elevating the genre by like experimenting with more than just 3 notes in a chord. Can we bring out more emotion if we're playing more than just power chords and some of that classical background? I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily have that, especially in the genre. And I think that it definitely adds a really unique flair to the music that I think really translates into the emotion, where there's nostalgia for the pop punk callbacks, but there's a whole new angle to it. So you can feel excited and it can feel new while being nostalgic at the same time. I think that's really a really unique thing to be able to hit on.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, especially in the pop punk genre, it's, you know, it's always based on a guitar, drums, bass, and the vocals, you know. And I think, I'm not saying that you gotta try to overproduce what you're doing. You know, you can come up with a great song with like the most simple elements in the song. However, in 2021, when you like see all those like new music that's being uploaded every day on Spotify, like all those new bands, they all want to, you know, make music. Like, I feel like keys, synths, and other than like production, and I think we're going to get into that later, but more specifically, but it can be keys, it can be like textures or anything, but I feel like being original with a rock band with like a bass, a drum, and a guitar and vocals, I mean, you got to have something very special if you want to get people's attention, because
For sure.
I don't know, I feel like you need more than that just to sound appealing. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm definitely hearing a lot more, especially with, there's a lot of 80s elements, I feel like, making their way into some more modern productions. A lot of really unique textures that's making their way, and there's a bit of this like hybrid of the genre happening, and it's really like leaning more into pop, I think, than, you know, I always called my bands uppercase pop, lowercase punk, because we were really trying to, I don't know, have not like necessarily go for mass appeal, but like, you know, what's catchy? What are people going to want to shake their booties to? And again, I really can't wait to talk about the recording, because I don't think people understand what goes into a track like Bitter. I mean, hundreds of layers is what I'm getting out of it. So, okay. Classical background, which is really fascinating to me. How did, I mean, like, tell me about when production became something you were interested in diving into.
So I started production actually with my own band, actually with Chunk. Chunk was actually the first band that, you know, I really wanted to, that made me wanted to, you know, push forward, because I felt like, well, first of all, like, we get along very well with the rest of the guys. Like, we're like good friends in the first place. So, you know, it's always the kind of band you want to be more involved. But I also thought that at some point that we had something interesting to bring on the table for the scene. And I'm saying this, it might sound a little cocky because we were like a very, very small band. And I mean, in 2008, like nobody really cared. But what actually, what I felt in 2009 or something, is that we all wanted to make pop punk, but we all also really wanted to make it work with like metal. Like, we all listened to like both ends of the, you know, rock spectrum, I would say.
Yeah.
And we always wanted to combine the two. And we first started with like a couple of demos that were like pop punk, and the other ones were like metal. And you know, I think we had that first EP that's kind of like, when you listen to the track list in order, you go from like a grindcore almost track, and then you go into like a Dangerous Summer sort of vibe. So it was kind of it was a mess. But we had a couple of pre-production for the album that we released 2 years later, and so here's the story, and that's where we kind of like understood where we wanted to go, and we understood that we had something interesting to put on the table here. We had a couple of songs that were written in C major. And, my voice was, going pretty well with that. But, I was kind of like struggling a little bit. Like, and I was like, okay, if we want to make an album, if we want to, come up with new songs, like, let's try something crazy, because at that time it was insane to do that. But like, let's play those pop punk songs like -2. -2 or -3. So like, I'm not going to struggle too much with my voice. So the guys were like, okay, that is weird, but they actually did it. And well, like there was like that interesting tone that, that we could hear. And for some reasons, my voice was sitting way better on those like lower tunings. So yeah, we had like that song, can't remember which one though. That was a typical pop punk song, but it was in drop A, So obviously, when you're gonna do like power chord, like those power chord like 0 on a pop punk song, it sounds weird at first.
Yeah,
but and that's where the guys actually, the guitar players, were like, okay, this is sounding out of tune. This is gonna be hard. Like live, this is gonna sound like shit. And it was true. It sounded like shit. But I felt like we had something. We needed to dig a little deeper, maybe, to see what would be the right compromise between like my sweet spot for my vocals and the guitars. And that's where the guys started to reach out to this French company that's making guitars, and they actually they had them make baritone guitars. So that would kind of like you won't get that floppy notes effects, especially on those like zeros.
Wait, so you were playing drop A sharp with a standard guitar?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, it was not even a question to actually make my guitar players play on 7-string guitars. That was not that was impossible for them. They were like, okay, we'll find something, no worries. But yeah, at some point, eventually, we actually ended up finding the right, like the sweet spot between, the low tuning where you could get like those very aggressive chugs and breakdowns and stuff like that. And my voice would still like sit on top of it, and I would feel much more comfortable. And the song sounded like beefier as well. Like they had more body, like they were like, it felt right. It felt right. And we're like, okay, we got something here. We have something here, and it's cool. And that's where we started to record, but like very properly, our like new songs. And we're like, okay, we're going for an album with this. And that's where I was like, okay, if I want to make it sound really good, I have to do it myself, because there is no way. Like this is such a strange thing. The major key in like low tuning, especially in 2009, I was like, okay, I gotta do it myself. So I started to dig a little deeper. I mean, I always worked on music production, but it was always for demos, pre-production and stuff like that. But this time I was like, okay, I cannot screw up this one. Like I have to do the whole thing, do the whole thing. And yeah, it took us a year and a half to, well, first record stuff properly, me to come up with mixes that were good enough, I would say. And a year and a half. And it was tough at that time because I was still like I was going to university, and I had to work for my exams and stuff like that. That was completely like that. It was law, so it was a completely different thing. But I managed to like find some free time. And plus, you have to also to realize that in 2009, there was not a lot of, well, tools. First of all, there was a few plugins, of course. It was like Amplitude and that sort of stuff. There was like Pod Farm, obviously, but there was not a lot of things, and there was not a lot of tutorials. Like on YouTube, it was very rare, actually, and like most of the things you could find was just like bullshit most of the time.
Still is, unfortunately. There's a lot of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. But yeah, anyways, it took some time for us to get it. But the cool thing about that first record is that in the end, we had exactly what we wanted. That combination of like that metalcore, because that's where we wanted to. That's what we wanted to do at that time. The metalcore tone with the pop punk songs, basically.
Right.
So,
and you weren't signed at the time, so you had the freedom to take as much time as you wanted to really get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's honestly, like, because what happened was that I did the first record, and when we got signed, Fearless, our label, wanted us to remix the album because they wanted the vocals to be louder than my first versions. The thing is, like, so Andrew Wade did it. But the thing is, I tried to explain to him, because obviously they were not like the best recordings in the first place. So there was a lot of my own tricks at that time that obviously he could not replicate without without my mindset. I think it still did a good job, but it was, in the end, I just wish our label to have just like send us to a proper recording studio, so we would have like re-recorded everything with a professional.
Okay. And Andrew Wade, he's most known probably for doing a lot of the Day to Remember stuff throughout their whole career. They were really popping off at that time. I know you guys get a lot of comparisons to them. I don't know if having Andrew kind of give you, whatever tricks he used on them probably helped your case, right? I mean, get the sound that people were enjoying at the time. But I feel like it would be really hard to, I think of Over It, when The Story So Far released their single Over It in 2016 or 17, and it was originally mixed by Sam Pura.
Yeah.
Everyone loved the song. And then when Eric Valentine redid it, I think it was a bit bigger, it was more vocal forward, Eric Valentine, he really puts a lot of pop elements in it, and people just like hated it. It was the same song, it was the same recordings, but people are so used to that mix that they've been listening to for the past year. I'm sure that feeling is even amplified as the songwriter, as the mix engineer yourself, having your own stuff reworked by someone else. Is there anywhere to find those original mixes from you to compare to Andrew Wade's?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so on Spotify, obviously you will find the Andrew Wade's version of the mix. If you type Something for Nothing, Chunk the Cat and Chunk on YouTube, actually most of the videos you will find, like the artwork is a tree, is a green tree. That's most of the stuff you will find, and you can compare the two. I think the biggest flaw on that first record was, the fact that I did not focus at all on the vocals. Like the vocals were like kind of like the least important, however. And now I realize how much of a mistake it was. But I'd rather have my label to come to me and say, hey, can you just like take your mix and just bring it a little more forward, bring the vocals a little more forward. Again, I'm very happy of like how Andrew Wade worked. Actually, it was a great experience. But again, it would have been even better if, we would have provided him with better recordings in the first place. Because again, I was at that time still like the recordings were like very amateur. And honestly, I felt like I was the only one who could properly deal with these. So
yeah. Yeah, man, when things are hacked together, you got to get in the mind of whoever recorded it. I don't envy a mix engineer being in that position when they didn't also facilitate the recordings. I feel like that's such a hard task because people record things for a very certain effect, or some of them do. and how do you know if that's going to translate? But
Right.
yeah, that's interesting, man. And so it looks like your first album you recorded out of necessity. You wanted to get this new sound that no one had really been working with before. Drop A Sharp is nuts, dude. And yeah, it's mostly like very heavy bands that were doing that, and they weren't incorporating elements of pop and pop punk to it. So it's interesting to hear that. It looks like from a quick Wikipedia search, the next album, Pardon My French, Joey Sturgis worked on that.
Yep.
And were you in the studio with him for recording and mixing, or did he just?
It was It was a complete studio session. The thing is, at that time, so here what you have to realize that we released our first record in 2010, and then we signed with our label, and we kind of like toured nonstop from like 2011 until 2013. And it was great, it was cool, and all of that, but the idea behind Pardon My French, our second album, was to actually make our sound even more our own, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically, the idea behind that was to have that album being more like a bipolar one, like having like the pop punk elements being like even poppier,
yeah,
and the metal, the heavy elements being like way heavy. So like a completely bipolar album, but yeah, we wanted to create that signature sound, but like even more with that album. That was the entire idea. So I guess the choice with going with Joey Sturgis was making a lot of sense because, well, first we didn't want to do something that sounded too natural. Like the idea was to go like full digital, just like right in your face, like straight to the point, but like very, very efficient,
Yeah.
So I think it was the right choice. Plus, there was a lot of hype around his work at that time.
Yeah.
So Sturgis. It was a great experience. We actually got along very well because it's kind of a special, I would say, but I don't know. We got along very well. We're kind of like the same kind of nerds, I would say.
Sure. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, listeners of the show might not know the name Joey Sturgis, but everyone has heard Someday Came Suddenly, which was Attack Attack's late 2008, 2009 release. And I mean, I think Joey was like the contracted producer of Rise Records, and
kinda, yeah.
People started calling that genre of like super heavy metal verses with the over-the-top dancey choruses. They started calling it Risecore, and that was Joey Sturgis's influence on the genre, and that went on for a long time. So I definitely, hearing you say it now, yeah, that makes sense. If you're looking for that bipolar, super heavy, super poppy, who else than Joey Sturgis? I mean, that's definitely the right move.
Yeah.
And it seems like around that time you were touring with Attack and stuff, right? So you were actively working with bands that he had worked with at the time.
Yes. And the cool thing though is, I think he understood what we wanted to do like instantly, and he understood the challenge, like the technical challenge that it was. So it was cool to be able to talk to him about it, actually a lot. And, we kind of discussed like the whole technicity of the mixing that will happen after the session, and yeah, I think he did a really good job. The thing though is, with Joey, with that specific album, we came to the studio very, very, very prepared. Like all the demos were like sounded like almost final, there was no room for songwriting. Actually, it was all about the recording and the technicity of like how we'll make this sound, but like we didn't write any song in the studio. Everything was like written, and so we could just focus on performance, technical stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely do want to get into the separation of songwriting and production on the newer album, because I'm always curious. I was kind of floored by how some bands came into the studio, usually bands that are further along in their career, with almost nothing.
Yeah.
And they work with a producer to write it there. Yeah, right, man. That sounds nuts to me, but it's interesting anyway to I mean, again, for my experience with Taylor Larson was he could just hear 5 seconds of a song and know how it was going to end up. Like he could just hear all the layers, all the textures. And to me, that was absolutely insane. And he talks a lot about how bands get demoitis, where they come into the studio with everything finished, and then the producer makes a suggestion. They think, hey, this would be best for the record. And they're not into it because the song's already written. They've already heard it this way for so long. It's hard for them to adapt and maybe get an outside perspective that, would have a different opinion on what would serve the record best, what would be the most exciting experience for a listener. It's interesting to hear that you came into that with everything already written.
Yeah.
Moving on to Get Lost, Find Yourself. You're now working with Kyle Black, who I know best from State Champs at this point. How was that experience different from Joey?
So now that you know the whole backstory for us going into the studio with Joey Sturgis, the idea with that third album was to do the exact opposite.
Okay.
Yeah. The album title is kind of like self-explanatory. Like we kind of wanted to see what kind of magic could happen in the studio here. Like the idea was to let stuff happen, And also we wanted also to experiment a little bit with co-writing sessions. So we had a few sessions in LA with different producers, and that was our first time to do this. I think it was at that time where with the band we wanted something new, but we did not really knew what it was, But we didn't have nothing specific in mind. And yeah, we did some co-writing sessions. It was interesting. Interesting. That's the only thing I can say, because it was cool, but I don't want to do that one more time. It's
okay.
Yeah. I like to write my own songs.
Sure.
It's, to me, every time someone puts his hand on our song, I'm like, oh no, God. So
gotcha. Yeah.
It was interesting. However, all the songs we did are on the record. We just kind of like rearranged it later on. But yeah.
Okay.
And working with Kyle Black was cool. He had a completely different approach in terms of everything than Joey Sturgis. Again, they're like the exact opposite. He's working like full analog, real amps, real drums, all of that. So which was cool. And this is something also we wanted to try with our sound, and that was the idea. But as the title say, Get Lost, Find Yourself, we were exactly at like in that place at that time. We wanted to try stuff, but with nothing specific in mind. And yeah, I'm proud of this record. I think it's sounding very, very unique in a way, and it's a different approach of our sound. I would say, it was interesting. It was an experience. I learned a lot from that. And that's it.
Okay. No, it's fine, man. We really spent more time on the past records than I thought we would, but I'm glad we did, because I think it informed, I guess, a lot of things. Because I didn't know until yesterday that the first album was self-recorded. And I think that lends a really interesting perspective on, in the 11 years since the first album that you recorded yourself, you worked with two like pretty legendary producers in the genre. You're now coming back to self-producing. How different was the process than the first time you self-produced Something for Nothing?
Well, first with that two completely different past studio sessions, I learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Not that I tried to copy those two producers, but there was a lot of knowledge, general knowledge about music production I got from those two sessions. And what's funny is that even in 2013 or 2015, I felt like not that I could do better than them, obviously, but I felt like our sound, it was an interesting take on our sound, but I feel like it was not exactly the way I had it in my mind in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was, no, I'm not going to say that it was frustrating, because honestly, I'm really glad of these two records. I'm really proud of them.
Yeah.
I think they're both really good. But now on that fourth album, I was like, okay, now, I'm doing this, and I want to project exactly what I have in my mind, like in every single details and aspects of that, process. So yeah, here we are in 2020, because we started the songwriting last year, beginning of last year, before COVID. And yeah, and a little bit of backstory before that is, when we stopped touring in 2017, we needed a little break from touring, and we decided to go back to normal life, because I was tired. Like, I was really exhausted from 6-7 years of constant touring.
I toured for 2 weeks back in 2009, and I'm still tired from it. It was nuts. Yeah, right? I can't imagine, dude. I cannot imagine.
And it was intense. It was very intense. Plus, I'm not gonna say that I'm old or anything, but when you're hitting 30 or something, you're like, you're not recovering so well from those tours.
Right.
So yeah, we needed a break. We needed a break for sure. I feel like I was my creativity was not at its best at that time too. So I feel like I needed a break, get back to normal life. So what I did was I started a business in 2017 with my brother in studio business, music production. However, mixing and producing bands, more mixing before that, but between 2011 and 2016, we were touring, but I was also working for bands as mixing engineer on the road, which was tough. I did a couple of bands, but it worked. But in 2017, I was like, okay, now I want to start this properly, and I want to start this new business, and that's where I started to work for bands, at first local bands, and then we got good contracts with few labels and stuff like that. But that's where I got my own experience of working for others. And I learned a lot, because Chunk is so a hybrid kind of band dealing with pop punk metal. Well, first I had very punk bands, but also very metal bands. So I had different approach of working with those bands. But also, what was very interesting is when I started to produce those bands, but produce more in a creative way. So I kind of wrote from scratch some songs with for some artists, and that's where I actually started to realize that a good mix is actually, it's first of all, it's a good arrangement, a good production, a good song in general. So and as soon as I started producing those bands and starting from scratch, I was able to actually make them sound really, really good without even having to mix it.
Yeah, totally.
So a good song, a good arrangement. Actually, you don't need any mix at the end. I mean, you always need some mixing after that, but it starts with a good song and a good arrangement, good production. So I produced bands from 2016 until now, because that's still what I'm doing. But I learned so much, and I improved my techniques so much that I was in 2020, I was okay, the next chunk songs will be I wanna put my best efforts in production, in the recording techniques into those songs. To me, that was a real challenge, and yeah, I don't know if you want to go further to the fourth record.
Yeah, totally, man. I'm really curious to know, before we get into like the more technical stuff, me as a not so great songwriter and not even that great of a music producer, I feel like I'm always trying to do the two at once, and it's really distracting. Like, I've been working on a pop punk Taylor Swift cover album for like 6 years, and I don't have like a single song done, because rather than writing the song, I'm like, oh, let's tweak the guitar tone. Let's try to get the snare a little more pop out of it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to do them both at once. So I'm curious as to the band's approach in the new album, Gone Are the Good Days. Where was the songwriting before you even started laying down tracks? Like, were you writing as you were recording, or was there like a rehearsal space where you were writing and then you took it to the studio? How did that all go down?
No, like I don't believe in jamming for songwriting. Actually, I mean it works. It works for a lot of bands, but just not for us. My mind is like so. Yeah, no, it's not working for us.
Okay,
it has never ever worked for us. But I'm just talking about chunk, and because a lot of good things can start from like jamming, obviously. So, well. First, we had like very high expectations, very, very high expectations. So each song, each riff, each starting point that we had, like there was a lot of pressure on all of those like starting points. I would say.
Yeah.
Because a little bit like you, like I wanted everything to happen at once. I wanted to have a great idea and a great sound at the same time. So the idea was to actually come up with the best pre-production, like the ones that will give us like the best preview of what we want as an album. So the cool thing is that with my experience working with other bands, like I have my go-to techniques that I could like apply on everything pretty much. And I feel like from that we had like couple of starting points and a couple of pre-production that were like we started to be very confident with. We would always start with the instruments. For some reasons on that album, like nothing got triggered by a vocal melody or something like that. It was always instruments first.
Okay.
And then we would think of vocals. Anyways, so we had. If you want to go a little bit more technical about that, that album.
Totally.
I was sick of the A sharp tuning. Like I was like, okay, like we're not gonna do another record that's like pretty much like 80% of the songs are like in A sharp. Plus, I wanted to push my voice a little bit further, see how far I could go. Kind of like the opposite mindset that we had like 15 years ago with our first album, where we kind of like adjusted everything according to my voice. Here it was kind of like the opposite. I wanted to see what would instrumentally it would sound good, and try to see what would be the right key, so where I don't crack my voice, but see how far I could push those like high notes without and giving it the right emotion. So yeah, just finding the right keys for those songs were kind of a struggle. So yeah, and at some point we realized that the guitars were either sounding too high or too low, depending on the tunings and the keys we wanted to do. And we were like, okay, this is not sounding chunk anymore, because like we don't get that beefiness, that beef that our fans are used to,
Yeah.
So we're like, shit, like how are we gonna do that? It's gonna be tough. But that's where it got a little interesting, because since the guitar work plays like has a huge part in our sound, like in our songs are like 50% based on the riffs, honestly.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, we'll try something. We'll have the 8-string guitar.
Oh my God.
Playing the riffs at the low octave. And we'll have the same riff, exactly the same riff, playing on a different, like on a standard guitar, like Stratocaster, Jazzmaster, play like one octave higher, playing the exact same thing at the exact same time. So like very edited in a very like surgically. For example, if you take that first riff for Bitter, when the whole band, like when you get like the full instrumental playing, you actually have 6 layers of guitars playing the exact same thing.
That main riff.
The main riff. You have the A string that's in drop F. You have the Jazzmaster playing the same riff, but like an octave higher, and you get like it's kind of like a fake guitar that I use that I kind of like did it myself. I don't know. This is where it is going to go a little bit too technical though. But
no, I love it.
It's just another layer to add some more texture. And we realized that it works because you don't feel like it's played on an 8 string, because it sounds like it takes like the full spectrum. And also like all the low guitars are, high gain, obviously they're like driven as fuck. And all the higher guitars that were like completely different on like P90 pickups and stuff like that, they're like more on a crunch tone. So you get the best of the two worlds, that because you will get like the clingy sort of sound from the Strat Jazzmaster in a standard tuning, and you will get the whole like beef and body from the 8 string. And you get in the end that huge wall of sound for just one riff that takes, full spectrum.
And that goes back to what you said about a good mix has to start with the composition, because a less experienced producer would record one guitar and then try to maybe throw a ton of saturation on it, like maybe duplicate it and bring it down an octave. But in order to make one guitar sound dope, it actually takes 8. And it's many different guitars and different elements. And that's usually not quite reserved for vocal production, but there's a lot of tricks in vocal production, because, I mean, a single voice is very thin and not even close to full frequency like the rest of the instruments take. So how do you make something that in reality is so small actually stand out in a mix compared to these things that are way louder, way, full frequency representation? And that main riff that I mean, are you still playing baritone guitars though? Right. He's still playing like the same white Third Eye, I believe is the brand.
Yeah. That's the brand. So that's very interesting. We got in touch with those guys. We sent them the album, because right now we have to think of the live performance and how we're gonna do that.
Right.
And again, the guys don't, like, the guitar players don't want to play on an 8 string on stage. That's that's not
who does.
No. So so we got in touch with the guys who helped us with the guitars. And we're like, okay, here's the problem. Here's we don't want 8 string guitars, but we want to play 6 string guitars, but that sounds like 8. And they were like, challenge accepted. Right. And they made a prototype for my brother that is actually a 6 string guitar sounding like an 8 string guitar. It's the same size, the same neck and everything. It's just the bridge is like way lower.
Okay.
And I don't know, they thought the entire, like, it took them like quite a while to actually come up with the instrument, but I haven't heard it yet, but my brother told me that's fucking sick, and that's unbelievable. Awesome. Like how good it works.
Awesome. And is that going to be custom just for him, or can I buy one of those guys?
So I honestly think this is one of the most ambitious prototype they've ever done, like in their like ever. So, and I think that if the promotion of the album goes well, because we have a lot coming still, especially for the fall. if the promotion of the album goes well, they're thinking of selling these. They also have a deal with Amazon, so you might be able to purchase it through Amazon. So
wow. Well, man, I just bought. I went out and bought a baritone guitar because I wanted to play your songs. So I bought Bo Burchell, who's the guitarist of Seosin. He also produced Moose Blood. He has a signature guitar from Balaguer, the Woodman BB Lightbringer. I just ordered it a while ago. It'll be here at the end of the month. Legitimately just because I really wanted to learn playing Dead, and I'm trying to play it in drop C sharp on my Les Paul, and it's just not sounding right. So I'll buy a baritone, but man, if you have a new signature model coming out, I might be putting that credit card to work.
Wait for this one. No,
cool.
For real. I just heard a short video that my brother did with so basically it's crazy just to see a 6-string guitar. He's playing 0 F. So and it sounds really in tune, perfectly perfect, and you get. I don't know, man. It's insane. Honestly, I think this guitar can be huge in the future. Let's hope that's happening. It's gonna happen.
I hope so, man. I mean, I'm really excited to hear. I'm not a huge guitar guy. I mean, I can play, Blink in the Story So Far and stuff, but I'm trying to get better by learning your songs. So anything you guys put out, it's challenging. So it's been great to practice on. But yeah, man. So Bitter is does it open the album?
Yep.
Or no?
That's the first track.
Okay. So I mean, it was the leading single. It's the opening track. The first thing you hear is that riff, and it's also the last thing you hear, and you hear it 2-3 other times throughout the song. And the thing that I immediately found very interesting is that you bring the riff back over and over, but every time it's usually on that 4th bar. There's something that's different that makes it unique and interesting every single time. For example, coming out of the first chorus, there's a different rhythm. The whole band kind of follows it. And then when the breakdown comes in, you get that rhythm, and then you end the song with the riff over the breakdown rhythm. And it's I had to do this in school all the time. I went to school for audio production, and we had to map out band songs. And I remember one of the ones I did, a We Came as Roman song, because I love Joey Sturgis, and their compositions were very complex and time signature changes and all kinds of auxiliary horns and bells and stuff.
Right.
And, mapping out each part, what instrument's playing it. Is it a callback to another part of the song, even if it's just a very simple rhythm, just a couple hits here and there. And I think that's what makes this song so interesting is the repetition without you even feeling like it's repetitive. It's a lot of callbacks. It's unique and interesting every time. And that's what got me wanting to ask you about how connected was the songwriting and the recording process, because if they're very separate, someone might be tempted to just write a riff and want to keep bringing it back. But a seasoned producer will know that it has to be subtly different every time, where it's the same riff but a little bit of a change. And I mean, it drives me nuts after that chorus. The rhythm is slightly different on that 4th bar there. To me, it's so brilliant. And I just want to scream, is everyone hearing this? How many people will not notice those subtleties? I mean, I don't really have a question. I just kind of want to scream at you about how incredible this song is. But
actually, to just talk about the songwriting of this song, what's actually really important to know about that one is it's the first track on the track list, but it was the last one that was written on the album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I did this kind of on purpose, because when we started the songwriting of this album, I kind of had the big picture in mind already. I kind of I know that I wanted 12 songs for sure. I know that I wanted an acoustic track. I know that I wanted with different and tracks with a specific mood. One is going to be heavier, one is going to be softer, and all of that. So everything was kind of mapped out before even getting into the songwriting.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to write the first track of the album last, because to me, when you get like 12 songs, well, when you have like 11 songs written, the 12th song is gonna be like the missing, like the missing piece of the puzzle, you know. And it's kind of like the most challenging one. That's the one that, you know, you get like, I mean, in my workflow, that's the one where I put like the most pressure on. It's not like the last random track that I'll be like, oh yeah, no, fuck no, like just the 12th track just to release, to have like a full album, whatever. No, it's the, like, you gotta ask yourself what's missing, like what's the piece that will make your album complete. And I knew that what was missing was, you know, that typical chunk thing, but also that first push of energy that fueled the entire album, you know? So this one has been written very, 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 very meticulously, like way, way more than the others.
I think it shows. It sounds like there's a lot of intention in it. I mean, to me, it's like a perfectly composed song. It sounds intentional without being fabricated, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't heard the album. At the time of recording, it's not going to come out for like a week and a half. We only have 4 songs right now. So you're talking about all these other different themes in the acoustic song. What acoustic song? I haven't heard it yet, so I'm psyched. But so to get into like the nuts and bolts, right? The riff isn't the first thing we hear. We hear this kind of like swelling of, I'm interested to know exactly what the sound is, but to me, it pairs with the music video perfectly, which starts with Buzz Lightyear VHS into the player. It sounds like when you would first put a Disney VHS tape in, and it gives you like, I think it might have been like THX or something, had this swelling like analog kind of sound to it. Was that intentional with the whole like nostalgia thing, or like, and what was that sound specifically?
Yeah, kind of. The idea was to, I don't know, trigger that nostalgia that would, like, the first second you will trigger something, you know. And like you said, like the THX kind of like sound is that was the idea. That was the idea. And more specifically, the sound of it, it's Jupiter synth.
Okay.
That's been going through a fuzz pedal, and it's been I think there's like a chorus on it. And you know what's cool on the Jupiter synth is that you can have like press one note and you can press another one, and you will have that great glide. Like the synth will like kind of like connect the two things. And the idea was to have that from like the very, very first note that he could handle to the very, very, very last note of the thing. Okay. So that you would get like a full glide for the whole like keyboard. So on like 8 octaves or something like that. So that the whole sample you hear is, and it goes actually, that glide. Yeah, I think it goes till the whole band start playing, actually. Not when the main riffs actually start. So it goes on like 16 bars or something like that. So it's a very long one.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, you immediately get the nostalgia, but then as it's drifting up to the root note, there's a lot of tension as it's like, it takes like a long time to resolve, you know? And I feel my shoulders tensing up, but like in a super good way. And eventually it gets to that note, and then the riff starts playing. It's just nice, man. Like, it's a nice, we talk on the show a lot. We did like a draft of all of our favorite album openers, and an album opener requires something very specific. Like, bands can go one of two ways. It can go like, you know, understated, pretty quiet, or like, let's open this fucking pit up. And that's that's always my favorite album opener. And I like that this gives you a minute to breathe before it just descends into like absolute beautifully composed chaos into that main riff with the whole band coming in. And I really liked the riff when I first heard it, but the thing that made me stop working was the snare tone. since you were able to self-produce, there's a lot of stuff on your Instagram and the recording vlogs and stuff. And did I see a hand hammered Black Beauty in there? And are you recording acoustic drums?
Okay, it's okay. That's cool that you brought that up. All right. So drums. When we knew that we were going for an album, we started to like be kind of like very ambitious about the all the production and all the tones. And I was with my drummer, and we were talking about, should we record real drums? Should we, I don't know, should we use samples? Should we, And we were like, you know what? Fuck no. Like, we are going to make our own samples just for the records, and we will actually, and that's big news actually. You are the only one who knows that, because it's not like, it's not released or anything, but
okay.
We are preparing the new, like a plugin that will capture all the samples for the album, plus 3 other kits that have been sampled during the same session.
Are these like Slate Trigger add-ons, or is it its own standalone VST or AAX?
It's a standalone. Wow. I mean, it's on its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
awesome. I'll be the first to buy it.
Awesome. We sampled 4 kits, and there is a Black Beauty in it. There is I don't remember. I don't know. That session was so intense, but we got plenty of kits. We did like a huge rental with like a lot of different cymbals and all of that. So, and we sampled 4 kits in the studio. But since we don't have like a huge room in our studio, we resampled the same kits in 2 different rooms with different sizes. And that's the samples that you're hearing on the record. But what's really cool is the fact that all those kits have been sampled in different rooms. You get that weird, like, not weird, but like that amazing 3D effects on everything pretty much, because you get like a small room made of wood, and you get like a medium room that has a little bit of room, but like that has more space, but you get that slap back effect on all the shells. And there's like a huge other room just to get that nice decay. And you can use, like, we are used to, like, when it comes to mixing drums, everybody puts like that short reverb on the snare, and then I have a longer, but it's always like processed through reverb. Here, the good thing is that it's real space that has been recorded, and I think that's what makes a huge difference here.
So if I understand correctly, the drums on the record are programmed, but everything is from samples you made specifically for this album.
Yeah. So, however, the drums have been played for real. We recorded the cymbals.
Yeah.
Just the shells have been replaced.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so there's some triggering with the samples that you made, but there was a performance in the recording.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And it's very important that the cymbals are actually real. They're actually played.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. There's so much clarity in the drums. There's so much like snap, and like you said, there's a lot of space. And yeah, I'm a drummer, but my drums are in the closet, like right off camera here, because I don't have anywhere to play them. I mean, I'm in a 10 by 10 room, and I've got 8-inch bass traps covering every square inch. I'm not fitting drums in here, so I'm rocking like Superior Drummer 2,
There you go.
But then you end up with the same sounding drums that everyone has, and the only way to make them different are to have probably the same samples that everyone else also has, or to slam it with convolution reverb or something that simulates a room that you just went into and recorded in, which it's hard to replicate that. So I mean, that's a lot of effort. That's a ton of effort. And I think it shows. I mean, the drums are just slamming throughout. I mean, that snare sounds so killer. There's I don't want to use the word resonance, because I think usually that implies something is like a little too much of something, but there's so much body and pleasant ring to that snare with a lot of snap, and it's so fat. I mean, what went into just like a snare drum? You recorded it, you recorded some samples, but if we want to jump ahead a little bit to mixing, I mean, what does it take to make a snare that loud, that focused, and that pleasing?
I think, yeah, the snare was, we focused a lot on the snare. And we had a very, very specific reference in mind. It's one sample that I have used in a lot of my previous mixes. And I was like, okay, we gotta make this sample our own with our gear, you know? So it was a journey, honestly, to get there. But in the end, when you get like the proper mics, the proper recording, like everything properly recorded in the right room, when you're like not pretty, but like very extremely confident about the whole process for the sampling session, like when you know you have between your hands like very good material to work with, and the only next step is for you to actually match your reference. It's actually pretty not easy, but you know you will get there eventually.
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, it took a minute. But yeah, I'm very glad. Honestly, like the biggest struggle we had, but not mixing it, but more tracking it and finding the perfect tone. Well, first and that's the reason why we did like a huge rental of drums for like 4 different kits with different size, is because we wanted to try everything. Wanted to see how everything was sounding. And at our surprises, like the drum that's on the record is not a Black Beauty. It's not supraphonic, because that's also one of the stuff we sampled. It's a Gretsch, but that's like very, very deep. I don't remember the reference exactly, but what was actually tricky was to find the perfect ring.
Yeah,
because tuning snare is never easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a drummer, but I can tell that my drummer was actually was struggling a lot just finding the perfect harmonic, basically, and also finding the perfect sustain, because when you have the perfect harmonics, finding the perfect sustain of it, like with not moon gels, but I don't remember what he used. I don't know, a drummer thing that I don't know. But I remember that it was the end of the day, and we almost gave up on that snare and he did something, and it was like, and I suddenly stopped and was like, yep, that's it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, here it is.
So, okay. So how long it was that whole process of trying to dial in drum tones? Are we talking minutes, hours, days?
Oh, we're talking weeks.
Weeks. Okay. And I mean, that's the kind of thing where if you were with another engineer, another producer, you would have had it a couple hours. So you would have gotten a totally different result. I mean, in a couple hours if you're lucky, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you get the tension on each head right. Are you working with like some kind of drum dial to measure the tension? Because I know a drum falls out of tune, especially when you're slamming on it pretty hard. So are you like tuning it halfway through songs? Also, I didn't even know this was a possibility. Working with Taylor, there were some times where he would record 4 bars at a time. I didn't know you could like record drums like that. I mean, how far in the recording process, how much at a time are you typically playing through? Are you like retuning every time? How meticulous is that process?
Extremely meticulous. Yeah, very. Honestly, it's one of the most critical instruments to record. I mean, it's pretty obvious, especially in our style of music. So the cool thing about dealing with samples, if it's your own or if it's commercial packs samples, you can always cheat. But yeah, I feel like the drum performance is always the one thing that can make a huge difference if it's done properly. And us, we were just recording while recording the song. We were just recording the cymbals because the shells were actually played on how do you call that? Those pads that don't make any noise.
Okay, like a practice pad or something.
Yeah. So basically, all the shells were like doing just like a very little sound. But the drummer, my drummer, would play the parts as if he was on a real kit, but he would focus more on like how he would hit the cymbals. But just hitting the cymbals just the right way is so like, it has such a huge impact on the songs.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, the drums, yeah, it's a critical instrument, but once you nail the recording process, the mixing process, when you just have to focus on like how your drummer should perform his parts, like it's actually really good.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So he's playing the kit, but the drums themselves are like a practice pad that doesn't make any sound. So you're just capturing the cymbals, so we can focus on just the cymbal. That's nuts, man. That blows my mind. I can't imagine what like the average listener would even comprehend with all of that.
And the cool thing about that too is the fact that during the actual performance there is no sound for the shells, like it's way easier to mix because when you do like the proper replacements for the shells, like with the samples, like you're like you have like endless possibilities to get like the tone, exactly the drum mix that you want. So
right, because a lot of time in drum editing and when you start mixing, there's so much compromise on the cymbals because a huge part of the job is removing the drums from the cymbal microphone. So if you have no drums to remove, that's total freedom.
Right.
But it's hard to do in a way that still sounds natural. I mean, part of me surprised to hear that you even did it that way because I mean, it definitely sounds like if you want to look at Joey Sturgis and Kyle Black, it seems like a very good pairing of the two of their styles put together. I think you guys pulled it off. I mean, I don't know how you fit that much sound into the same amount of headroom everyone else has. It's pretty gnarly. So guitars themselves, I mean, you said that the band is very guitar heavy. How did you go about recording guitars? Are you miking cabs? Is it impulse responses? Are you making your own?
So yeah, we have a couple of amps at our studio. We have a Mesa triple rectifier.
Hell yeah!
We have the Marshall. That's really good. GCM 800. Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got like all the standards. All the standards. It's going through like double Mesa cabs, which are really good. However, what I like to do is record the DIs as well. So, we could like, blend whatever we feel like it's needing. But the thing is, with the specific guitar process we had for this record, so having like all the guitar parts played on the A string at an octave lower, and everything on a Stratocaster on a crunch sound, you don't need much to make your guitar parts sound good. I mean, it takes a lot of time to actually do all those recordings and editing and all of that. But, we did not really focus on the amps or the technicity that, about the drum tones, because our drum tone is basically that sort of layered techniques of guitars. So, yeah.
And this is a question that going back to the riff that's recorded on 6 or 8 different tracks, are you manually editing them to be in time? Or are you using something like Vocaline to kind of push the waveforms together? Because the whole point is you don't want to hear 8 guitars. You want to hear, to the listener, it's one guitar that has the strength of 8 together. So what, in the editing process, tell me about like how you actually managed to pull off the sound of just a single sound coming from 8 sources.
Yeah, you got to be very critical with your editing? Well, first about the performance, I think that's the most important thing.
Yes.
You need to get that raw energy coming from the instrument itself, and make sure everything is played with the right intention. And throughout the record, I would say that all the guitar parts, except maybe the softer songs, but all the guitar parts have been played very, very aggressively.
Okay.
And what's really cool about our technique is that, like the standard tuning guitars, you get that precision from the crunch sound and the tone of the guitars, like that clingy sort of sound. You get that, a lot of precision from that. And you can actually mess a little bit more with, or no, the opposite. You can actually let live a little bit more your high gain tone with the A string, because that's more like the body, and you don't need that much precision. Actually, the most of the precision comes from the standard tuning guitars.
Okay.
But anyways, you need everything to be perfectly in tune, perfectly on time. Then it's all a matter of finding the right balance between the two main layers, the low octaves or the high ones. But sometimes we get a riff on the sixth song of the record, where it's like very typical, like single notes playing, but same technique, same sort of layers. And the A string guitar here is very floppy, not in tuning, but like the way it's being played. But when I first got the tracks, I was like, "Are you sure it's been played or recorded like properly or anything?" And it was like, I don't know, but I felt like it was grooving a little bit more like this. And I actually put all the tracks together. It was like, yeah, it works. Like one is floppy, one is extremely tight, but somehow it creates like a perfect combination of like the wall of sound that kind of like live, like it grooves. I don't know, but it's cool. It's cool.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. It's definitely what separates a demo from like a properly recorded album is, I mean, it's, you record with your cousin in his bedroom and you get, a single kick in and a snare and, one guitar recorded left and right. And it sounds like a demo or like something from the early 90s. It's production has become so sophisticated as digital has allowed opportunity for, I think Pro Tools just upgraded to like, you want 2,048 tracks, you got them. Like that's insanity. I mean, back in the day you had 4, the Beatles were recording on 4. And it's just, there's so much to do in order to keep up with modern production styles and capture that energy. And not even just for the sound itself, but like, I don't want to not mention the bass guitar, because obviously it sounds very good, but to me, the vocal production on all of them, but especially Bitter, I've been studying this song. I've listened in like, stereo on multiple devices. I'll throw it on 5.1 in the living room just to see what happens. I'll listen on mono. I'll listen with just one headphone in different volumes. Every single time I hear something, whether it's a vocal harmony or there's a piano doing a tinkly little thing in the background, there's a pad coming in and out. There's something different every single time. And it's not just for the sake of making it sound modern, but also so someone like me can listen to it 200 times in a month and still be excited by it every single time. I mean, it's what gives it replayability. And the vocals, it's very pop. To me, the vocal production sounds very pop inspired, where it's never just a melody. I mean, there is so much texture. I think I heard some falsettos. There's some low octaves, maybe all kinds of harmonies.
Oh yeah.
I feel like this is probably where your classical background really comes into play, of understanding how to stack harmonies to, your melody can be this, this fun poppy, whatever, but all this other stuff is moving in the background to complement it. I mean, when you're recording, and again, you're writing as you're recording, so I understand there's a little bit of availability to experiment, but you have the main melody after the music's written. Do you just keep hitting record and seeing what works, what doesn't? Are you playing it on a piano first? Because I mean, these are extremely complex vocal compositions.
So I'm glad that you noticed the vocal production, because kind of like what we did with the guitars, that was kind of like the same idea. Like there's a lot of layers just to make it sound like at its fullest, you know. I think Bitter is not the most ambitious song we have vocal, like just talking about the vocal productions, but there's still a lot of layers. There's a lot of falsettos, there's a lot of low octaves, there's like, and there sometimes, I mean most of the time they're like actually barely noticeable, but it always, I don't know, it always brings something. And if I feel like, you know, at that part, during that soft part of the song, for example, I want the vocals by itself, just one track, just to make it like very sensitive and all that, like, and then you have that next chorus that kicks in, you get like so much contrast, so much like intensity, like the song and the mix has like so much movement just because of the vocals. So I always treat the vocal production as an arrangement on its own, because I think it's so important. That's the first thing that people will hear, actually, and especially those people that are not so into that kind of music. They can actually, you know, you can actually grab their attention if you produce the vocals like in a very pop way, like the way it's been done in and exactly the way you said it. That's funny because that was exactly my mindset when I started mixing this record. I wanted a rock metal album it sounds like a pop album, you know. I wanted to have that balance where the vocals are up front, the drums are up front, and the guitars will be, you know they're here, you can hear it very clearly, but they're not as, you know, medium.
Yeah.
They're not like in like hitting those like high frequencies that will be clashing with the vocals, because I think that's always been a problem to me, where like you get those like rock albums where you get that high mids very confused, because like you get so many instruments clashing with the vocals, where, you know, while the vocals should be the most important thing, the thing that should be like the clearest, you know. And that's what I tried to achieve on that record. Have like the most like vocal clarity, while like pretty much like a pop record, where you get like the beats very, very, very high, like you get like a rich low end, but most importantly, you have the vocals like clear, loud and clear up front. So I'm actually very glad that you noticed that, and exactly the way you said it, because to me that's a huge accomplishment.
I mean, it's really great. I think it's like a masterclass in like how to produce a modern sounding rock song. And I think it's interesting because you mentioned the guitars are like a little bit tucked away. I think probably the tuning does help, since it's a little bit lower. It's in the deeper register. It separates itself more from those air frequencies of the voice in the, you know, the upper mids that you really need for the clarity. But it's interesting if you listen to the post chorus where the riff comes back. I mean, the guitar is taking the space of the voice. Like that is the main focus. And then in the chorus itself, it seems like the leads, they're still there for texture, but the rhythm guitars are tucked back a little bit. It actually is like surprisingly low. The guitars are surprisingly low in the mix during the chorus, but that's where like the vocal production shines. And the thing that was always really hard for me to comprehend as both a songwriter and composer and an audio engineer, a music producer, is the interplay between all of these, the instruments, the voices, passing off the attention, how things have to fit into the frequency spectrum. Not everything can be everywhere. It's a really complicated puzzle to put together.
Yeah.
But when it's done well, hopefully the listener won't notice anything. Like that's kind of the average listener won't notice anything. And then you get fucking nerds like me that are like, you know, doing a doctoral thesis on this song itself. But I mean, it's just, it's a brilliant composition. And I kind of got the feeling that this was written in the studio, because it is too well put together to be a few guys jamming in a room. Like that stuff just doesn't happen that way, you know?
But I'm glad that some people can think of it that way, you know, that it's I don't know, like, you know, I know what I did for the song, and I know what kind of production that's behind it, but I also, you know, like got some comments that says that it's one big push of energy, and you don't even question that too much. You feel like it's one song that's complete, and that's it, you know, and that could also be for some people that just don't have like trained ears, like the one song that a band jammed in their garage, you know. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would love to. I know that you're signed to a label, so it's like probably inappropriate to ask, but like I would pay money to hear the isolated vocals of this. So like, because again, I've legitimately listened to the song hundreds of times, and it took me probably 75 spins to notice in the last chorus you go through it twice. When you say the word bitter, it kind of goes into the beginning of the second part, and out of the bitter come ooze. That's just like a really nice descending melody. And every single time you hear that chorus, it's like with the riff, every time something's a little bit different, every time you hear that chorus, there's another layer. And what that gives to a song that, again, in modern production, it's so loud, there's not a lot of dynamics to be had in terms of raw loudness. The composition has to be dynamic. So every time you hear the chorus, it needs to be better than the last time that you heard it. So there has to be something else in there, another vocal layer. And I just think the way it all culminates at the end with those low oohs coming out of bitter into the last chorus there, and then slams you right back into the breakdown with that riff. Fuck, man. Like, I apologize for just like fangirling, but this is so brilliantly written.
You know that song better than me now. Like it's crazy how like you know like every single details. Like that's insane. That's insane. This is like the most detailed review, like by very very far, that I've heard about that song.
I just think it's like perfect, man. Like again, it's that it has it didn't sacrifice the integrity for the technology of the recording. You know, there's a lot of really great interplay between the songwriting and the recording, and maybe maybe that has to do with them being done at the same time.
Also, one thing is that maybe I don't know, maybe that's part of it, maybe not. But the only thing that I didn't do myself was the mastering, because mastering, I still think it's one of the things that's very mysterious. However, I made sure that I had like the perfect mix to my ears and send it to, the guy that I trust for the job. And one thing that I really wanted him to achieve is having like a dynamic mix, which means a not so loud mix. It's not like, and if you compare all the songs of the album to like other commercial release, it's actually not quiet, but it's definitely not as loud.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of like why maybe the drums are more punchy than other releases, or you get more dynamics overall.
Totally.
And I'm very glad that we decided this, because obviously like some guys in the band wanted this to be like way louder and like being like, but I was like, no. Like loudness does not mean a thing anymore. So let's give it a little more headroom and dynamics.
Well, yeah, that was fascinating, because I listened to this song so much in isolation that then when I listened to like, I put on, whatever else after, I actually had to turn it down a little bit. And the overall loudness of the track, maybe it's not quite as high, but I feel like it's way more powerful. And like you said, it's because it has that headroom. You're not trying to slam the snare right up to zero when it's got nowhere to go. There's some room to breathe, and maybe you have to turn it up a tiny bit after coming off of an Architects album or something. But I don't think I think you get a lot of energy back, and it also makes individual components the composition itself is more dynamic when, you know, the chorus can be a little bit louder than the rest. Well, man, you know, we spent most of the time talking about Bitter, which is totally fine by me because second greatest song ever written. But I mean, of what we have from the album Complete You came out the other day, I was like sitting in my car 5 minutes until I like talked to my therapist. I heard AJ Padermo's voice and I was like, boom, depression cured. Like I had no idea. So I used to live outside of the DC area for like a long time. Around 2009, 2010, and they were up in Ellicott City, right outside of Baltimore. And I swear to God, I was seeing them once a month for like 4 years. It was
really
the best. I mean, the Dangerous Summers, one of the greatest bands I've ever heard in my life. Such a pleasure to hear him on the album. The voice works perfectly. And as if it couldn't get any better. The music, hard stop, and a fucking saxophone solo. Can we talk about that for like a minute? Because like not even in like a YouTuber, you know, Nick Nocturnal reaction way. I was like, I screamed in my car when I heard that smoky sax come in, man. How did that come about? Like you had this room to fill. Did you always know it was going to be a sax? Did you experiment with a guitar solo?
Yeah, at first it was a guitar solo, but you know, that song was kind of like in the first place, that song was a weird experiment. Like we wanted to do something weird, but still something that sounds like our band, you know. So we wrote the song and we were pretty happy until like the second chorus, and we're like, okay, here comes the bridge. And you know, when you gotta write a bridge, it's either, you know, you're gonna go completely standard, you're gonna do like the regular sort of progression and breakdown, whatever. And we're like, you know what? Like this song is so special, unique. Just with the two verses and the two choruses, we're like, we got to do something better than that. And I think honestly, like that, we decided this kind of like completely randomly. Like we're like what about a saxophone? And we're like, oh, like fuck yeah, well yeah, why not? And so instantly I checked on Fiverr, you know, like the website, and yeah, and I found the saxophonist from Australia, but like I went on the pro website, part of the website, which is kind of like a little bit more expensive, but like you get, you know, you're pretty confident about the result you're gonna get. And yeah, the guy was like, he loved the song instantly, like, and 24 hours later, like I had 8 versions of the solo, very properly recorded, like all that. So I had to do a little bit of edits, a little bit of editing, trying to take the best piece, like best. Yeah, I did. I had to do a little bit of edits, and one thing though, everything, like the saxophone has been like dubbed by a synth. You can hear it in the back, but it brings a little more movement with like a little bit of a vibrato,
yeah, totally,
tremolos sort of thing. And yeah, it turned out to be freaking amazing. So yeah, I'm very proud of this song. It's such a, I don't know, that was a journey.
It's fun, man. I mean, you mentioned that every song has something a little bit different, something for everyone. And of the 4 we have, one is it's a re-recording from a previous album, right? Blame It on the Song.
Mm-hmm.
But still, there's like, it feels cohesive, but very experimental. It sounds like friends having fun in the studio. And I mean, I think that's what a good record should be. Obviously, commercial success. Yeah, I'll take it. But like, at the end of the day, this is an experience for a listener to have. Take them on a journey. 2020 sucked, man. Like that was a really brutal year. And a lot of people like really struggled and they felt very confined with the situation that they were in. But on the flip side, there were a lot of artists and creatives that felt a lot of freedom in, this is a situation we've never seen before. What can we do with it? And it seems like this album, you know, especially after coming out of like a bit of a informal hiatus of sorts, this album is like pure creative expression. And I've only heard 4 songs. I mean, there's so much more to dig into. Can't wait to do that. Already pre-ordered the vinyl like the day like the minute it was available.
Awesome.
I'm really psyched, man. And I feel like as an artist, as a musician, as a recording engineer, there's a lot to learn from this album itself. So I really admire the effort that went into making this something special, because I truly believe that it is. I'm so stoked to listen, and just I can't thank you enough for being here and chat with me, man. It really does mean the world. I'm super excited to have had this conversation.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate your comments. That's very, I don't know. It speaks to me even more than, you know, that now that we're talking about music production, and now that I know that you know even better than me. That's insane. But no, that's really cool. Also, I really hope you will enjoy the rest of the record, because, like, you know, I said it, you know, plenty of times already, but like each song has its own like surprises, but like songwriting wise, but also, you know, in terms of technicity and all of that, there's a lot of surprises. So yeah.
Awesome.
I just want this album to be released already. Like, I just can't wait. It's for me, like, it's a full experience. Like, you need to listen to this from start to finish. I mean, it's cool to have dropped like that. We have dropped like those first singles now, but like I said, this album has been thought like with the big picture in mind. So I just can't wait for everyone to experience it.
Yeah, me neither, man. Super stoked. If people want to grab the album, I mean, what's the best way that they can support you, either as a listener, or if they're in a band, they want some mixing services, anywhere they should go in particular that would be of the most support to you?
Sure. Like I'm doing I'm taking mixing jobs. I mean, I'm currently pretty busy with a lot of stuff, actually. So especially with all the plugins that we will release pretty soon. So yeah, there's going to be the drums, but there's also going to be like the amps and all of that. So I just can't wait for. So yeah, I'm working. I'm pretty busy at the moment, but I have I work for bands. It can be mixing, songwriting, so like stuff like that. So you can check out our website, which is Alias Studio. I mean, yeah, you reached out to us through this website. Just so now everyone knows, and yeah, we provide we offer mixing, mastering, and yeah, a little bit of songwriting. I'm trying to be very cautious with that, because doing this online is not always an easy task. Yeah, but totally. But yeah, eventually we do that sometimes.
Awesome, man. Well, again, I really appreciate it. Stoked for the album. Really grateful that you're here, and yeah, best of luck with everything. Stoked for the plugin. That's going to be, sounds like a game changer.
We'll see. Thank you, man. Thank you again. Thank you for having me. It was great talking about the record, talking with you. And yeah, next time. And yeah, hopefully you will hear about us, about those new plugins and stuff like that pretty soon. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah. So yeah, talk later.
I hope you all dug that interview with Bert, the singer of Chunk, No Captain Chunk. Please make sure to go stream the album. It is available right now. Gone are the good days. Buy it on vinyl, support the band. I really cannot thank him enough for coming and having this really awesome conversation with me. Check out the show notes at reminiscentpodcast.com/episode/234 to check links for where you can stream the album, stream past albums, contact Alias Studio for mixing, mastering, and songwriting services. Thank you all so much. We love you, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye, everyone.